Slum Dwellers International is a network of slum dwellers from about 22 countries in Africa and Asia. And I am not a slum dweller. I support, and like me, there are many other professionals who support this organization. The reason Slum Dwellers International was created was to create a voice for the urban poor. And we realized people like us can't keep talking on their behalf. Unfortunately, I'm doing that today. And it is important to create and build their own capacities to be able to negotiate with their cities for land and housing, which is their biggest issue. Slum Dwellers International was created in 1996. We today work in about 10 countries in Africa and about 12 countries in Asia. And the main objective is to build the capacities of local poor community women to be able to talk to their cities, and to empower them to be able to negotiate for land, to be able to construct their own homes, and to be able to maintain and look after this asset after they have got it. My story begins in Bombay in 1986, where you had evictions every other week of pavement dwellers. And you had municipal vans that would come, break their homes, and go away. And we realized that this was not a way of solving the problem of housing for the urban poor in the city, but we had no solution. We didn't know what to do. We were not planners. We were not architects. We didn't understand anything about housing. And our only clues we got were from the women. And we kept meeting them every day on the streets. And the messages that they gave us were very clear. They said there is nothing to go back to in our villages, so we can't go back there. They said, we all dream of a future house for our children. We don't want them to live on the streets with plastic and paper and tin sheets. It's an aspiration we all have for our children as well, so there was nothing wrong about that aspiration. And they were very clear that they were ready to move from the pavements to a decent place if the municipality helped them find a place that was also convenient for them to do their economic activities. So we thought this was a very reasonable demand. But we couldn't just go to the city of Bombay and say, give us land. They would throw us out, because you're talking of a city where the land estate prices are so high. They're as high as Tokyo and New York. And if you went to a city bureaucrat in the early 80s, he would tell you, go away, we don't have land for the middle class, we can't be entertaining pavement dwellers. And so one of the strategies we used was to begin to do our homework. We said, what kind of homework do we need to do and put in place in order to be able to talk to government, in order for government to begin to listen to us? So the three main areas of homework we did was, first of all, land, because very clearly, if you went to the city bureaucrat, he would tell you there is no land in the city. So we said, let's check this out. Let's check it out whether it's really true that there is no land in the city. So we would take picnics of pavement dwellers, and all of us would go ticketless on trains and buses and check out different vacant lands in the city. This was a very interesting exercise, because for the first time, we suddenly felt we were getting to understand our city better. And we realized land is just not a commodity. It's something that's very emotional, and it is something very sensitive for people. And so you don't just look at it as what the value of it is. And you saw women relate to it like that. And when we went to these vacant pieces of land, we would check out who the owner was. We would check out whether there was a chance of they getting a job in the new place if they moved there. What would it cost them if they commuted to work up and down? Would they get jobs at the place that they moved to? And things like this were basic questions that all of us ask when we move into a new home that the poor never have a right to ask. And this was our first exercise in actually empowering ourselves, both as people who were supporting them along with these women. We were able to look at the master plan, and we realized that the master plan was not sacrosanct. There were a whole lot of myths related to the master plan, and we saw that in a place that was reserved for low-cost housing, there was actually a cigarette factory there. And so we realized if the master plan can be manipulated by outsiders and people in power, I'm sure we can also manipulate it if we do our homework well enough. And so we actually prioritized 10 pieces of land, and we said we're not going to take no for an answer. And if the government says no for the first, we'll ask for the second, and if they say no to the second, we'll ask for a third, and we did our homework so well. Meanwhile, we also did a savings program, because we said we can't go to any bank and ask them for a loan. They'll throw us out because you're a pavement dweller. So what do you do for the bank to be able to begin to listen to you? You need to have a track record of your own savings and your own credit history, that they trust you and they're ready to give you a loan. So we asked ourselves basic questions like this in order to be able to reach out to different actors in our city who we thought could possibly help us. So vacant lands, savings, and then we did house models. And we saw that these three areas, and you as surveyors and professionals will understand that land and money and your house design and construction are monopolized by professionals today. And that's the reason why I look at these escalating prices that the very poor cannot afford in our cities. And we said, if we are able to crack these three things, then the other half of the battle was, of course, to organize these communities and get them to work like an organization. And then we would be able to talk to our city. And so the women took their saris, which is 3.5 yards, and we're talking of illiterate women who don't read and write, and they put it on the floor 3 times, and they decided that would be the length and breadth of their house. They took their chains, which were 1 foot long, and they used that as a measurement scale. And so you just demystified the role of architects, you demystified the role of surveyors, because they sat and measured their land, they did their own local community maps. And we are not glorifying these skills and saying that the professional has no role to play, but it was important for women to understand that this was not rocket science, that if they had a solution in hand, they could go to government and talk about it. So in Dharavi, which is one of Asia's largest slums, when the women did a survey, they realized that 800 people used a toilet. Now, if you just went to government and said, give me a toilet, they'd throw you out. But if you went to government and said, you know, we've done the survey and 800 people use one toilet, and therefore you have so many people squatting in the open, then they understand that language. And so we also had to learn a new language to talk to government. We realized the screaming and shouting and the demonstrations of the old-fashioned NGOs were not the language government was ready to listen to anymore, and that you had to do your homework before you spoke to government. Slowly over time, we realized that we needed to actually scale this up, because working with 2 or 3 beautiful communities was not going to be the answer to the problem. You're talking of 6 million people in a city like Bombay, and few professionals cannot solve this problem. And how do we build the capacities of these local communities to be able to learn these basic tools of mobilizing? And this is how the movement spread to 70 cities in India, and it spread. We started outside the country, South Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa. We've just started in West Africa. We've just moved into Brazil, other Asian countries. And slowly, local governments and central governments are beginning to see that we are not there to attack them, that we go there and tell them, this is the homework we have done. We want to know what you have done in order for us to be able to find a solution jointly to this process. In Bombay, we shifted to 20,000 families living along the railway tracks as part of the Mumbai Urban Transport Project. And this was done totally by the Federation, by poor people, along with the city. They found the lands that they thought that they could shift to. They worked out their own shifting. There was no need for the police, or we didn't need an eviction squad to do it. And they maintained and managed those houses after they got those houses. So these are not impossible situations. You're talking about trust. You're talking about cities beginning to realize that the poor are their asset, that they're not a liability. And cities by themselves don't have the solution. Professionals on our own don't have the solution. The private sector doesn't have a solution. And land is such a complex issue that you need many more actors to play this game, and we cannot play this game alone. And the reason that I was motivated to come here to talk to you today is to tell all of you as surveyors and land professionals and land administrators that we actually need your support. We need your support to be able to talk to all those surveyors and land planners in all the cities that we work in Africa and Asia. so that they begin to realize why it is important for them to invest in this other half, or 80% of their city's population, that are non-citizens, as they call them. And they truly believe that because they're non-citizens and they're not taxpayers, they don't have a right to land in that city. How do we bring that shift? How do we change that mindset? And I think an institution like yours has a lot to contribute and has a lot in the way of changing your own curriculum so you're able to address this issue in the next 25 years. Malawi today has constructed over 200 houses. The federation in Nairobi were able to sit with the World Bank and their local city and say, this is not the plan we want, because they worked out a plan that was really difficult. And they worked out a new plan which the city accepted. So these are different examples to show us how the city and poor people, along with professionals like us, can make a difference. Thank you.